Maya and Daniel thought the carnival was the perfect escape from their boring summer nights. But when they stepped onto the towering Ferris wheel at the far end of the fairgrounds, they realized too late that it wasn't built for fun. Halfway into the ride, the world below froze, the people turned faceless, and something began climbing into their car. What started as a harmless ride into the night sky quickly became a descent into a place that should not exist. The carnival lights shimmered in the distance like stars scattered across the earth, pulling me closer with every step I took. It wasn't the noise or the crowd that drew me in, but something else entirely. My eyes fixed on the Ferris wheel at the far edge of the fairgrounds, towering above everything else, its glowing lights pulsing irregularly as though they were alive. Each bulb blinked like an unsteady heartbeat, some going out and sparking back to life while others flickered weakly. The cars dangled from the wheel's frame, rocking slightly. Even though there was no wind, they looked heavy, too heavy, as if carrying something invisible. I told myself it was just a ride, just another attraction, but the deeper I stared, the more it felt like the Ferris wheel was staring back. I had loved Ferris wheels since I was a child. They always gave me a sense of freedom, a moment to see the world from above, small and safe beneath my feet. This one, though, had an aura that made my chest feel tight. Still, I couldn't resist it. My legs carried me closer, almost against my will. The ride operator was a shadow behind the booth window, his face obscured, his movements stiff. I avoided looking at him as he gestured me inside one of the cars. The door slammed shut behind me, and the cold metal bar locked across my lap with a snap that echoed too loudly in my ears. The seat felt damp, though the night air was dry. The ride began with a groan of machinery, and the car lifted slowly into the air. At first, it was ordinary enough. The view unfolded beneath me. The carnival spread out like a living painting, tents glowing with strings of lights, children running through the paths, couples holding hands, vendors calling out in muffled tones. The sounds blended into one another, a mixture of laughter, screams of delight, and carnival music. From above, it all seemed so fragile, so small, like pieces on a board. For a moment, I felt that same childhood wonder return, but then, the higher I rose, the quieter everything became. The music dimmed, the laughter thinned, until the only sound left was the creak of the Ferris wheel itself. The car swayed gently, rocking with every groan of the massive structure. My stomach twisted with each swing, though I told myself it was just the height making me uneasy. But it wasn't the height, it was the silence. It was too sudden, too complete, as though someone had lowered a blanket over the world and smothered the noise out of existence. The wheel jerked and stopped, my car hanging motionless high above the carnival. I leaned forward, trying to spot the cause. Maybe someone else was loading into a car below. Maybe this was just part of the ride. My eyes scanned the fairgrounds, but something was wrong. The people weren't moving. Not one of them. A crowd frozen mid-step, mid-laugh, mid-gesture. A man stood with a balloon tied to his wrist, the string stiff and unmoving. A woman leaned toward a child, her hand forever inches from his shoulder. Their stillness wasn't natural, wasn't playful. It was absolute, like statues made of flesh. My mouth went dry as I searched the faces. That was when I noticed they weren't even faces anymore. Features blurred, melted, until all that remained were blank ovals of skin. Yet somehow, impossibly, every one of them was turned upward, tilted toward me. The entire carnival, hundreds of frozen, faceless figures staring at me with nothingness where eyes should have been. The air in the car grew colder, pressing against my skin in heavy waves. My breath fogged in the air, though the night had been warm moments before. The silence deepened, swallowing the sound of my heartbeat, smothering the frantic rush of my thoughts. I pressed my hands into the seat to steady myself, but the dampness felt thicker now, sticky against my palms, as though the car itself was bleeding something unseen. I wanted to scream, to call out, to demand the ride be stopped, but my throat constricted painfully. My eyes stayed locked on the frozen figures below, unable to look away no matter how badly I wanted to. They were waiting, expecting something. The lights of the carnival flickered once, then again, until the entire fair pulsed like a dying star. Each flicker made the faceless crowd seem closer, their featureless heads tilting further upward, their bodies leaning in directions they shouldn't have been able to bend. Then, as if the world itself exhaled, the Ferris wheel creaked forward again, dragging me higher into the black night. But the people below did not move. They stayed exactly as they were, silent, frozen, faceless, and they never broke their stare. And in that moment, swaying in the air, I realized I was no longer a rider enjoying a carnival attraction. I was the attraction. They weren't watching the wheel, they were watching me. The Ferris wheel lurched upward with a jolt that rattled through the metal frame, sending my car into a slow, uneasy sway. My grip tightened against the cold bar across my lap, and I tried to convince myself it was nothing more than the normal shudder of an old ride. But my eyes kept drifting down, to the carnival that should have been alive and glowing beneath me. The faceless figures were still there, locked in their strange, rigid poses, their heads all tilted upward. No music played now, no laughter, no sound at all. It was as if the world had been drained of its energy, leaving only this moment, this climb, and their blank attention fixed entirely on me. The higher I rose, the smaller the carnival became, but the figures never faded from view. Their stillness carried a weight, a pressure that followed me even as distance grew. It felt like their stares weren't bound by space, like their eyeless faces pierced directly through the night sky to keep me tethered. My heart raced as the lights flickered below, shrinking into dim, pulsing specks that seemed to beat in rhythm with the churning of the Ferris wheel. I turned away, desperate for distraction, and looked across to the other cars swinging along the arc of the ride. At first, I thought they were empty. Their shadows stretched long in the glow of the lights, but each car looked bare, swaying gently in the breeze. I leaned forward, straining to see more clearly, and that was when I noticed the shadows didn't move like they should have. Some bent too sharply against the seats, some stretched upward as though climbing invisible ladders, and one in particular leaned far across the metal frame, its elongated arms reaching out as if searching for something to grab. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry and sticky, my breath short and shallow. The shadows swelled and shifted, crawling across the seats like oil slicks. I couldn't see what was casting them. No body, no rider, no living thing sat in the cars, but the shapes were alive all the same. They weren't just shadows, they were wrong, detached from anything real. They bent and twisted against the dim light, expanding across the wheel until I felt their reach brushing closer toward me. Then the ride stopped again, this time jerking me so high I could feel the structure groan under the strain. My car rocked dangerously, the metal whining in protest, and I had to grip the bar tighter to keep from sliding across the damp seat. For a second, the thought of being thrown into the black air below filled my mind, almost preferable to the unbearable stillness that had swallowed the world. Looking down again, the carnival was no longer familiar. The frozen figures had dimmed into faint silhouettes, their edges dissolving like smoke in the faint glow of the lights. The tents sagged in strange shapes, like deflated lungs collapsing inward, and the booths twisted until they looked like shrines made of bone. I blinked, hoping it was just my fear distorting things, but every time I looked again, the carnival looked less like a carnival and more like a graveyard of broken things. A creak shuddered through the frame of the Ferris wheel, and the air around me grew colder, sharper, as if the wind itself had changed into something alive and cruel. The silence pressed harder against me until I could hear only the thundering of my own heartbeat, loud and frantic inside my skull. And then, movement. From the corner of my eye, I saw it, a pale hand sliding into view from the car directly below mine. It curled upward over the edge of the seat, long fingers bending backward at impossible angles, each knuckle cracking like brittle twigs under pressure. The skin was too thin, almost translucent, stretched so tightly over the bones that it looked ready to split. The nails were sharp, broken at the tips, scraping against the metal frame with a sound that made my teeth ache. The hand gripped tightly, and the car beneath mine groaned as if weighted down by something heavy. The ride didn't move, but the car swayed with purpose, rocking violently as though whatever clung to it was climbing, dragging itself upward toward me. I froze, pressing my back against the cold seat, every nerve in my body screaming for me not to look down, not to see what was pulling itself higher. But I couldn't stop hearing it, the scrape of nails against steel, the wet drag of something hauling its weight closer. My knuckles turned white around the bar as I forced myself to stay perfectly still, as though movement might make it climb faster. The carnival below dimmed completely, vanishing into black. The only light left came from the ride itself, a sickly glow flickering in irregular bursts, illuminating the pale hand inching higher, finger by finger, until it was almost within reach of my car. And then, just as I thought I would finally see the rest of it, the hand slipped away. The scraping stopped. The car below swayed once and went still, as if nothing had been there at all, but the weight didn't leave. The air in my car shifted, heavy and close, pressing against my skin in suffocating waves. And though I didn't dare turn around, I could feel it. Something unseen now sat with me, hidden just out of sight, its presence pressing close enough that every hair on the back of my neck stood on end. I sat frozen in place, the bar across my lap digging into my stomach, as if reminding me not to move. My car swayed gently, but the air around me felt wrong, thicker, heavier, every breath shallow and strained. The scraping sound had stopped, but the silence it left behind was worse. I didn't have to turn around to know something was there. The feeling of being watched pressed against me like invisible hands, my skin crawling with every second that passed. The weight of another presence filled the car, and though I couldn't see it, my body knew. Instinct told me I wasn't alone. The Ferris wheel groaned as it shifted forward again, pulling me higher into the black sky. Each creak of the massive structure echoed through my bones, sharp and deliberate, like the sound of chains tightening. The ride wasn't carrying me anymore. It was dragging me somewhere I didn't belong. My chest tightened as the car tilted slightly, dipping lower on one side as though something unseen sat opposite me. The balance was wrong, unnatural, and I gripped the metal bar tighter, my knuckles aching from the strain. I tried to distract myself by looking out at the world below, but the carnival had changed again. The tents were gone, the booths erased. The rides collapsed into shapes that looked less like metal and more like twisted ribs of long-dead creatures. The ground shimmered faintly, rippling like liquid but darker than any water I had ever seen. The frozen figures that had stared at me before were gone too, and in their place was emptiness, stretching endlessly in every direction. I was suspended over a hollow void, a black sea with no surface, no reflection, just depth without end. The air inside the car grew colder, biting at my skin with every exhale. My breath fogged in front of me, curling into the air and vanishing too quickly, as though it were being swallowed before it could disperse. That was when I heard it soft, uneven, directly behind me, breathing not mine. It was shallow at first, almost hesitant, then deepened into ragged gasps, each inhale like a knife scraping against glass. My spine stiffened, and I felt warmth brush the back of my neck, the unmistakable sensation of a mouth exhaling too close to my skin. The car rocked harder now, not with the wind or the machinery, but with the deliberate shift of weight. Whatever was with me was moving, testing its place beside me. The sound of nails returned, but this time they scratched against the inside of the car itself. I could hear them dragging across the ceiling, the walls, the seat. Each scrape was wet, sticky, leaving streaks I couldn't see but could feel through the vibrations. My heart pounded so hard it hurt, and I pressed my eyes shut, praying it would vanish if I refused to acknowledge it. But then the light above my car flickered. I opened my eyes just enough to glance upward, and that was when I saw it not directly, but in the reflection of the glass bulb. The thing was clinging to the ceiling of the car, its body twisted unnaturally, limbs stretched too long, bent at impossible angles to hold itself above me. Its head hung low, tilted downward, but its face was hidden in shadow. The reflection was faint, fractured by the dirty glass, but I could see enough to know it wasn't human. I couldn't move. Every instinct screamed at me to jump, to throw myself from the car and into the endless dark below rather than stay trapped with this thing, but my body betrayed me. My muscles locked, frozen in terror, unable to do anything but stare into that broken reflection. The wheel jerked forward again, sending the entire structure groaning as though it were being torn apart. My car swayed violently, and the figure in the reflection did not sway with it. It remained perfectly still, locked to the ceiling, its limbs spread wide like a spider waiting to strike. The lights flickered again, faster now, each flash revealing more of its shapeskin that looked too tight for its body, ribs pressing outward, and a neck that twisted unnaturally as if it had been broken. The breath behind me grew louder, hotter, until it felt like fire searing the back of my head. My vision blurred, my eyes burning as tears welled and spilled over. I wanted to close them, to block it out, but a sudden jolt stopped me. The car dipped suddenly, hard enough to wrench my stomach upward, and for the briefest moment, I felt fingers brush against my shoulder. I couldn't stop the gasp that escaped me, and the sound seemed to wake something in the air. The scratching stopped, the breathing ceased, the car went still. For a few heartbeats, there was only silence, the kind that pressed so heavy it felt alive. Then, slowly, the reflection in the glass bulb began to change. The thing clinging to the ceiling lifted its head, turning it inch by inch until its face aligned with mine. Hollow sockets stared back at me, empty yet filled with a darkness that swallowed light. My own eyes looked back at me from inside them, as if the reflection had stolen them from my skull. And in that terrible instant, I realized I wasn't staring at something invading my space. I was staring at something that had been a part of me all along. The reflection burned into my mind, hollow eyes staring through me, carrying my own gaze inside them. I wanted to look away, but the harder I tried, the more the reflection pulled at me, holding me captive in its impossible stare. The figure clung to the ceiling of my car like a grotesque insect. Its body twisted, its limbs spread too far, bent too sharply as though bones had snapped and reformed in wrong places. It didn't sway with the car's movements, didn't obey the laws of balance or gravity. It remained perfectly fixed, an anchor in a world that had begun to unravel. The Ferris wheel gave another violent shudder, and I felt the entire car tilt forward, sending my stomach plunging. The sound of metal screamed through the air, a deep aching groan that carried more than mechanical strain. It was alive, echoing like a howl through the black sky. The air pressed thicker against my chest, every breath like inhaling water, heavy and choking. The car rocked, and for a brief second I thought it would snap free from the frame altogether. My fingers dug deeper into the bar, skin tearing slightly against the rusting metal. But even the sting of pain felt muffled, distant, as though it weren't entirely mine anymore. I forced myself to look outward again, desperate to escape the reflection's grasp. What I saw below chilled me to the core. The carnival was gone, erased completely. In its place stretched rows upon rows of Ferris wheels, towering in every direction, their silhouettes barely visible in the faint, pulsing glow of lights that weren't really lights at all. They spun endlessly, slow and steady, their cars swaying with the weight of unseen passengers. It was endless, a graveyard of wheels turning above the same black void, each one groaning in unison like a chorus of dying creatures. The closer I looked, the more I realized the cars weren't empty. Shapes sat inside them, still and unmoving, their outlines distorted as though some leaned too far out, some hung limp as if lifeless, Others pressed against the bars as though straining to escape. Every one of them turned toward me, their hollow eyes glowing faintly with the same darkness I had seen in my own reflection. I felt them watching, hundreds of them, waiting for me to understand. The air inside my car shifted again. The thing above me stirred, its limbs creaking like dry wood, its neck twisting too far with a sickening crack. I didn't want to see it, but I couldn't stop watching the reflection. Slowly, agonizingly slow, its head lowered further until its face hovered just inches above mine. The sockets widened, hollow but impossibly deep, pulling at the edges of my vision, as though they wanted to swallow everything I was. I could see movement inside them, faint and flickering scenes of myself. Not memories exactly, but fragments, standing in line for the ride, stepping into the car, gripping the bar with pale, trembling hands. I was looking into my own past, trapped inside those empty sockets, reliving every moment through something else's gaze. The realization struck me with cold clarity. This wasn't just watching me, it was learning me, copying me, becoming me. The Ferris wheel shuddered again, harder this time, and I felt my body jerk with emotion. But it wasn't just the ride moving anymore. The reflection shifted too, its body pressed closer, and for a split second, its face and mine overlapped in the reflection of the bulb. My breath caught in my throat as the image fused, hollow sockets becoming my eyes, my face splitting into its twisted grin. I tried to move, to scream, but my body didn't respond. My arms stayed locked, my chest heaved shallowly, but nothing obeyed me. It was as though my movements weren't mine anymore. I was a passenger in my own body, reduced to a shadow of thought. Below, the endless rows of Ferris wheels groaned louder, their creaks rising in a terrible harmony that echoed through the black. My car's light flickered violently, then dimmed, until it was the only glow left among the sea of wheels. I felt chosen, singled out, though I wished more than anything to disappear among the rest. The reflection leaned in closer, its face finally revealed as the shadows melted away. Its skin was too tight, stretched over a skull that didn't fit it, veins writhing beneath the surface like worms, and its eyes, though hollow, gleamed with a twisted familiarity. They weren't empty anymore, they were full of me. The wheel began to descend, groaning as it carried me lower. Relief should have washed over me, but the ground below wasn't solid earth anymore. It was black liquid, endless and rippling, reflecting the countless Ferris wheels above. The silhouettes in the cars remained still, but their faces, my faces, tilted upward in unison to greet me. The car rocked one final time, and in the reflection above me, the figure grinned with my own mouth. The wheel slowed as if preparing to let me off, but I knew there was no exit waiting below. The closer I descended, the more the world unraveled. The ground was no longer solid but a slick black surface that shifted and rippled as though alive, reflecting endless towers of Ferris wheels stretching into infinity. Each wheel turned with the same slow rhythm, their groans harmonizing into a sound that made my teeth ache, a noise that wasn't mechanical at all but organic, like a chorus of throats crying out together. I wanted to believe it was just the wind, just metal under strain, but every vibration told me otherwise. I searched the other cars as mine descended, desperate to see something human, something real. Instead, I saw passengers that weren't passengers at all. They were figures shaped like me, but wrong. Their bodies slumped forward, necks bent at odd angles, hands twitching against the bars that restrained them. Some looked like hollow shells, their skin sagging loosely as though their insides had been scooped out. Others were too stiff, their mouths locked in silent screams, their eyes glowing faintly with a dull black fire. I saw myself reflected in every single one. Fragments of who I had been scattered across the wheels, each trapped in its own endless cycle. The ride stopped with a violent lurch that shook my bones, but it didn't stop at the platform. My car hovered just above the shifting black ground, the surface rippling beneath me as though eager to swallow me whole. The bar across my lap pulsed faintly, no longer metal, but something softer, warmer, almost alive. I tried to lift my hands, to pry it away, but my arms wouldn't respond. They sat rigid at my sides, fingers twitching uselessly. The realization spread through me like poison. I wasn't in control anymore. The air thickened, pressing down on my chest, stealing what little breath I had left. My heart thundered, but even that felt distant, like it no longer belonged to me. And then I felt it, the shift of weight beside me. The presence that had lingered unseen for so long finally settled, merging with me. It was no longer behind me, no longer above me. It was inside me, wrapping around my thoughts, pressing its fingers through the cracks in my mind. The car rocked once, and I could see my reflection in the glass bulb above. My face stared back, but it wasn't mine. The skin sagged strangely, the eyes sunken and hollow, the lips twisted into a grin I couldn't stop. I tried to scream, but the sound never came. The reflection moved its mouth in perfect silence, speaking words I couldn't hear, yet I felt them sink into me all the same. The Ferris wheel began to rise again, lifting me into the sky once more, and that was when I understood. There was no end to the ride. It didn't carry passengers to safety. It carried them into itself, feeding on them, remaking them into something else. The rows of endless wheels weren't rides at all, they were cages, prisons for those who had ridden before me. I wasn't the first. I wouldn't be the last. As the car ascended, the surface below rippled violently, and for a moment, I saw something moving beneath it. Shapes writhed just under the black surface, arms stretching upward, faces pressing against the liquid as though begging for release. I recognized them, every single one. Faces of the passengers I had seen frozen before. Faces of people who had once laughed, once lived, now trapped forever below, part of the machine's endless hunger. The bar across my lap tightened until I could barely breathe. My body convulsed as the weight inside me pressed deeper, fusing with my bones, hollowing me out. My thoughts flickered, fragments slipping away as though they were being erased one by one. I tried to hold on to my name, my memory, the faint image of who I had been before this night, but even those began to dissolve. In their place came whispers, voices that weren't mine, filling my head with a language I couldn't understand. They grew louder with every turn of the wheel, until they drowned out everything else. The car reached the top again, swaying gently, and I felt my body finally still. My breath slowed, my heart quieted. My reflection above no longer looked wrong. It looked complete. The hollow sockets were filled now with me. Far below, in a place I could barely remember, the carnival lights flickered to life again. Music drifted faintly through the air, laughter mixing with the hum of machinery. The Ferris wheel glowed, alive with color and promise, inviting someone new to step forward. I felt the faint echo of footsteps, someone waiting in line, someone about to take their place in the car. The wheel groaned as it slowed, and I realized my turn was over. I wasn't the rider anymore. I was part of the ride, and as the next car opened to welcome its newest passenger, my reflection grinned wider, waiting to watch them realize the truth.